Imagine this, you walk into a room full of people and instantly your mind starts racing. What do they think of me? Am I dressed right? Did I say the wrong thing? Are they judging me? That voice in your head, that constant craving for approval, it's not just noise. It's a prison. Most people don't realize it, but the search for approval is like carrying invisible chains around your neck. You think those chains are helping you fit in, helping you belong. But the truth, they're pulling you further away from freedom. Approval is the enemy of freedom. And here's why. Approval is one of those things that feels sweet on the surface but ends up poisoning you slowly from the inside. People love to be liked, loved, and accepted. It gives a rush of pleasure, a sense of belonging, and a momentary relief from self-doubt. The problem is that approval doesn't just sit quietly in the background of your life. It becomes addictive, it becomes a drug, and once you start depending on it, you don't realize that you're giving away more and more of yourself every single day. When you constantly look for approval, your decisions stop being your own. You wake up in the morning and before even taking a step, your brain is already asking, what will they think? You go to work and rather than pursuing what excites you, you start aligning yourself with what your boss wants to hear. You spend time with friends and instead of being real, you put on a version of yourself that feels safe, that feels acceptable. That won't make anyone raise an eyebrow. That might keep the peace in the moment, but what you don't realize is that little by little, you're building a cage around yourself. This is how approval becomes a prison. It convinces you that you're free while it keeps you chained to the expectations of others. You may think you're making your own choices, but in reality, those choices are being filtered through the invisible screen of, will they approve? It's like carrying around an audience in your head, one that never stops clapping, judging, or booing. And every time you choose approval, you hand them the remote control to your life. Over time, you forget what it even feels like to make a decision purely because it matters to you. You forget your own voice because it's drowned out by the voices of everyone else. The really tricky part is that most people don't even notice this prison. It feels normal to seek approval. It feels natural because it starts when we're kids. Approval from parents made us feel safe. Approval from teachers made us feel worthy. Approval from friends made us feel like we belonged. And so, as adults, we carry this habit into our careers, our relationships, and even our smallest daily actions. But the truth is, what once served you as a child becomes toxic when you're an adult. The very thing that made you feel secure is now keeping you from being free. Think about the times you've said yes when you wanted to say no. You told yourself it wasn't a big deal, but it was, because every yes against you will chip away at your authenticity. Think about the times you smiled and nodded when you disagreed, all to avoid judgment. Each one of those moments was another link in the chain of approval. You think you're keeping the peace, but what you're really doing is betraying yourself. And self-betrayal, repeated often enough, becomes your normal way of living. That's why so many people wake up one day, look at their life, and wonder how they ended up so far from who they really are. Approval imprisons you because it convinces you that your worth is external. It tells you that you only matter if others clap for you, if others validate you, if others smile when you walk in the room. But if your worth is always dependent on the outside world, you'll never find peace inside. You'll always be anxious, always be performing, always be bending yourself into someone else's shape. That's not freedom. That's slavery dressed up as success. Rejection is one of the most powerful fears human beings carry. The thought of someone looking at you, listening to you, and deciding that you are not good enough feels like a dagger to the heart. It is almost instinctive because deep down, our brains still associate rejection with danger. Centuries ago, being cast out of the tribe meant death. If people didn't accept you, you would be left alone in the wilderness with no food, no fire, and no protection. That ancient wiring still runs through us today, even though modern life is different. This is why rejection hurts so much. But here's the truth, rejection is not the end of the world. Rejection is actually a sign that you're alive, that you are expressing something real, that you are stepping beyond the safe zone of endless approval. The irony is that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid rejection. They bite their tongue instead of speaking their truth. They chase jobs, relationships, and lifestyles that feel safe because those choices carry the least risk of someone disapproving. They learn to edit themselves down into the most acceptable version, cutting away the rough edges, the bold opinions, the quirks that make them unique. But in the process, they lose something far more valuable than the comfort of acceptance. They lose themselves. Avoiding rejection may shield you from short-term discomfort, but it guarantees long-term emptiness. Every meaningful act in life carries the possibility of rejection. If you share your art with the world, some people will not like it. If you speak your mind, some people will disagree. If you follow your own path, some people will criticize. But here's the thing, rejection is not a reflection of your worth. It's simply feedback that your truth doesn't align with everyone else's preferences. And that's okay because it was never supposed to. You were not born to fit neatly into every box society builds. You were born to live authentically, and authenticity by definition will ruffle feathers. Rejection, in fact, is proof that you're standing for something. It means you're willing to draw lines, to say what you believe, to take risks. Think about the people you admire most in history, in art, in business, in social change. Every single one of them was rejected at some point. Writers were told their work was unpublishable. Leaders were laughed at before they were respected. Innovators were ridiculed before their ideas changed the world. The path to freedom is paved with rejection slips, harsh criticisms, and disapproving stares. If you are not facing rejection from time to time, it means you are still hiding in the shadows of other people's approval. The most dangerous thing you can do is try to please everyone. When you dilute yourself to avoid rejection, you also dilute your impact. You become forgettable, replaceable, invisible. The truth is, people don't respect the ones who bend in every direction to be liked. They respect the ones who stand tall, even when the wind of disapproval blows hard against them. Rejection separates the real from the fake, the committed from the comfortable. It clarifies who you are and what you value. Instead of fearing rejection, you can begin to embrace it. You can see it as a natural side effect of living authentically. Every time someone rejects you, it is proof that you showed up as yourself rather than a watered down version designed for approval. It is evidence that you took a risk instead of playing it safe. The sting might last for a while, but behind that sting is a reminder you dared. You lived. You didn't hide. And that is always better than being liked for a version of yourself that doesn't even exist. Freedom and approval can never truly coexist because they pull you in opposite directions. Freedom is about living according to your own values, creating your own path, and choosing actions that align with who you really are. Approval, on the other hand, demands that you bend yourself into whatever shape others want to see. It forces you to trade authenticity for acceptance, truth for comfort, individuality for conformity. You cannot be both fully free and constantly approved of, because the essence of approval is submission to someone else's standards. The more you chase it, the more you give away control over your own life. When you live for approval, every choice becomes a performance. You dress a certain way not because you love it, but because you hope others will approve. You say things you don't mean because you want to avoid conflict. You pursue careers, relationships, and lifestyles not because they set your soul on fire, but because they look impressive to the outside world. You become an actor in a play you didn't even write, reciting lines that aren't your own. And while the audience might applaud, deep inside, you know that applause isn't for the real you, it's for the mask you're wearing. Freedom asks you to take off the mask. It asks you to stand bare, unprotected, and real. It asks you to choose not what will get you approval, but what will give you peace. That is a terrifying choice because the moment you remove the mask, you expose yourself to judgment. You risk disapproval, criticism, even ridicule. But here is the paradox: only when you risk losing approval do you taste what freedom actually feels like. Freedom is not comfortable, but it is liberating. It is messy, but it is honest. It is uncertain, but it is real. Many people confuse approval with love. They think if they can keep everyone happy, they will be loved and safe. But approval is not love, it is control. It is conditional. It says, I accept you only if you behave in the way I want. Love, in its truest form, doesn't demand that you sacrifice your freedom. Love allows you to be yourself and still be valued. Approval is fragile and fleeting. Freedom is grounding and lasting. When you trade freedom for approval, you end up with neither. You lose yourself in trying to be everything for everyone, and ironically, you never fully earn their approval either. The truth is, no matter what you do, someone will disapprove. You could be the most generous person on the planet, and still someone will find fault. You could try to live without offending anyone, and still someone will dislike you. Approval is a moving target, one that can never be caught. Freedom, on the other hand, is always within your reach if you are willing to stop chasing approval. It is as simple as asking yourself, what do I value? What do I want? What is true to me? And then living in alignment with those answers, regardless of who nods or shakes their head. At the core, freedom is self-respect. It is looking in the mirror and knowing that you live today according to your truth, not somebody else's script. Approval is borrowed respect, temporary and shallow, given or taken away by the moods and opinions of others. You can either live shackled to the constant need for applause, or you can walk your path freely, even if it means walking alone at times. You can't have both. One demands your mask, the other demands your soul, and only one of them can give you a life worth living. The cost of chasing approval is nothing less than yourself. On the surface, it might look harmless to go along with what people expect, to nod when you disagree, to accept the job that looks good on paper, or to marry the person who seems right in the eyes of society. But each of those choices, small or big, adds up. They stack on top of each other until one day you look at your life and realize that very little of it actually belongs to you. It's a college of other people's opinions, stitched together with threads of expectation, but missing the fabric of your own truth. Approval convinces you that you're gaining something, security, acceptance, admiration. But what you're actually losing is the deepest, most important thing you have: your sense of identity. It starts quietly. Maybe you make a choice in school to study something you don't love because it will make your parents proud. Maybe you accept a promotion you don't want because it makes you look successful to the world. Maybe you say yes to a relationship that doesn't fulfill you because it fits into society's timeline of how life is supposed to look. Each time you do this, you convince yourself it's no big deal, that you're just making compromises. But these compromises are not small. They chip away at your core. They force you to live a life that might impress others while leaving you empty inside. The scariest part is that the world applauds this kind of life. People cheer when you follow the script, when you tick off the boxes, when you stay inside the invisible boundaries of acceptability. They see the surface, the house, the job, the partner, the image. They admire the mask, but they never see the slow erosion happening underneath. You play the role of someone who has it all together, while inside you feel like a stranger in your own skin. And nobody notices because approval disguises the truth so well. When you live for approval, you're not living at all. You're surviving on borrowed definitions of success. You're building a life that looks polished on the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. You end up constantly restless, constantly questioning, constantly chasing something that seems just out of reach. You think if you just get a little more validation, a little more applause, then maybe the emptiness will go away. But it doesn't. The emptiness grows louder because deep down, your soul knows it was never consulted in the decisions that shaped your life. And here's the brutal truth: no amount of approval can replace authenticity. Approval can give you status, but not fulfillment. It can give you applause, but not peace. It can give you recognition, but not meaning. What matters most, the sense of being true to yourself, can never be bought with other people's praise. In fact, the more you chase that praise, the more distant you become from yourself. That's why the cost of chasing approval is so devastating. It's not just that you miss out on your passions or your dreams. It's that you lose the very foundation of who you are. You forget your own desires, your own opinions, your own voice. You stop knowing where other people's expectations end and where your truth begins. And eventually, when the noise of approval fades, when the applause dies down, you are left with the painful realization that you never lived your own life. You lived theirs. The courage to disappoint others is one of the hardest things to develop, yet it is also the foundation of true freedom and respect. From a young age, we are conditioned to avoid disappointing people. We want our parents to be proud, our teachers to be impressed, our friends to accept us. That instinct doesn't disappear when we grow older. Instead, it grows heavier, shaping how we speak, how we act, and even who we become. But here's the paradox: the more you try to avoid disappointing others, the more you disappoint yourself. And self-disappointment is far more destructive than anyone else's disapproval because it rots you from the inside out. When you constantly live to meet expectations, you build a fragile kind of acceptance that depends entirely on other people's moods and opinions. You learn to smile when you don't want to agree when you don't believe, to show up when you'd rather walk away. And each time you do, you train yourself to believe that your needs are less important than the needs of everyone around you. But freedom demands the opposite. Freedom requires you to value your truth enough to risk letting others down. It requires you to be willing to say no, to stand your ground, to walk away, even when you know people will frown, criticize, or misunderstand you. Disappointment is not the enemy people make it out to be. Yes, it hurts to see someone upset with you, but that pain is temporary. Living a life that constantly betrays your own desires is a pain that lasts forever. You can recover from disappointing someone else, but you cannot easily recover from years of betraying yourself. The courage to disappoint others is essentially the courage to respect yourself. It's choosing to believe that your inner voice matters just as much, if not more, than the expectations that surround you. And here's the paradoxical reward: the moment you stop fearing disappointment, people start respecting you more. They may not always like your decisions, they may even criticize you, but they will recognize that you are someone who stands firm. Authenticity commands respect in a way that constant approval never will. People may be temporarily upset when you say no, but deep down, they admire someone who has the backbone to draw boundaries. Think about it. Who do you respect more? The person who always bends and says yes to keep everyone happy, or the person who dares to say no when it matters? Respect doesn't grow out of pleasing others. Respect grows out of integrity, and integrity is born the moment you choose to be true to yourself, even at the cost of disappointing others. Every great achievement in history required someone to disappoint others. Innovators disappointed traditionalists. Leaders disappointed the comfortable majority. Artists disappointed critics. If they had all chosen to play it safe and keep everyone happy, nothing new would ever have been created, no progress would have been made, no truth would have been spoken. Courage is not about keeping the peace. It's about standing for what is real, even if that means others walk away. Learning to live with the discomfort of disappointing people is what sets you free. It teaches you that you can survive criticism, that you can endure rejection, that the world doesn't end when someone disapproves of you. And in that survival, you find a deeper strength. You realize that every no you give to others is actually a yes to yourself. Every time you choose honesty over approval, you are reclaiming a piece of your freedom. Over time, those choices build a life that is yours, not a life borrowed from the expectations of others. And in the end, people will respect you more for living honestly than for living in the shadows of their approval. Every single day, life presents you with choices, and each choice is essentially a fork in the road. On one side is approval, the easier path, the path of safety, where you shape your decisions to fit what others expect. On the other side is freedom, the harder path, the path of truth, where you act in alignment with your own values regardless of who claps or criticizes. The reality is that freedom is not something you stumble upon once in your life. It's something you must choose again and again, moment after moment. It is not a one-time declaration of independence. It is a practice, a discipline, a way of living that demands awareness and courage every single day. Most people underestimate how many of their decisions are influenced by the pull of approval. You choose your clothes based on how others will see you. You phrase your words carefully to avoid offending. You post online with one eye always on the number of likes. These may seem like small things, but together they form a pattern. And that pattern is either moving you toward freedom or toward dependence. Each time you silence your voice for approval, you strengthen the chain. Each time you choose authenticity, you weaken it. Freedom is built through these micro decisions, the little daily acts of choosing truth over comfort. The challenge is that approval often feels good in the short term, while freedom pays off in the long term. Saying yes to something you don't want may keep the peace today, but it leaves you restless tomorrow. Biting your tongue may avoid conflict now, but it builds resentment that will eventually consume you. Freedom may feel uncomfortable at first. It might mean facing criticism, rejection, or misunderstanding, but it gives you a lasting sense of peace, a deep knowledge that you are being true to yourself. Every time you choose freedom, you are making a deposit into the bank of self-respect, and that compound interest grows into unshakable confidence over time. Choosing freedom daily requires clarity about what you value. Without knowing what truly matters to you, you will be tossed around by every wave of approval or disapproval. But when you are grounded in your values, when you know what you stand for, it becomes easier to walk away from approval. You can look someone in the eye, hear their criticism, and still feel steady because you know your actions align with your deeper truth. Values act as your compass, helping you navigate the tension between approval and freedom. Without them, you drift. With them, you move forward with direction. The beauty of choosing freedom is that it creates a ripple effect. The more often you do it, the more natural it becomes. At first, saying no to approval feels terrifying, but over time, it becomes liberating. What once felt impossible, voicing your opinion, setting a boundary, walking your own path, starts to feel natural, even empowering. And people begin to notice. They may not always like your choices, but they sense your authenticity, and authenticity is magnetic. The irony is that when you stop chasing approval, you begin attracting deeper forms of respect and connection because people trust those who are real. Every day will test you. There will always be someone who wants you to bend, to stay silent, to fit in. And every day, you will have to decide, do you live for their approval or do you live for your freedom? This is not a decision you make once. It's a decision you must keep making again and again. And over time, those choices create the story of your life. That story will either be one of quiet compromise or bold authenticity. It all depends on which road you choose at each fork. And the truth is, only freedom can give you a life that feels like it's truly your own.